An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 177. I'm Aaron Pollier.
I'm Darlene.
We actually watched a pretty damn good movie today. We were surprised about it, mainly because we had no real expectations, and it started off a little slow, and it gets under your skin.
It's a horror.
It is horror. I don't think there's any science fiction at all in this. If there is, it's very, very nebulous, let's say. But this firmly fits in Earth versus Soup, because this is, if a old school Twilight Zone or Outer Limits episode had been made into a movie at the time. This is I Bury the Living from 1958.
Not even an
inspiring title?
No, it's not.
No, because it accurately describes the movie, though. That's the thing. It's not trying to pretend to be anything that it's not, and it's actually really damn good. But we need to talk about the people that made this film before we get into it. I Bury the Living, as I said, was released in 1958. So this is
in July.
Okay. The writer is Louis Garfunkel. I'm sorry. And he didn't do a ton of science fiction horror, but what he did was The Deer Hunter from 1978, which is a pretty hardcore psychological film. Okay. Robert De Niro's in it. It is a amazing movie that is very difficult to actually watch because of how intense it gets. Let's put it that way. It's a good movie, Darlene. I know that you've never seen it because we tend not to watch Vietnam War movies, but this is arguably one of the more important Vietnam movies, along with Apocalypse Now and things like that. Watching this movie, you can get a sense of what the Deer Hunter, the kind of intensity that it can have. Okay. We have two main actors in this, and this is a movie that really doesn't have a female lead. There is women in it.
There
are. Yeah, but they're just not there for the story. They barely touch in the story, because this movie theoretically could have a single character on screen. This is a movie where
you'd have to have two.
No. Well.
You'd have to have the caretaker.
Okay, you can have two people on screen. Everyone else is on the phone.
Yes.
You could do this movie as a two-person act on stage, and it would be completely doable. It would work. It would work, because the movie is not about relationships with people. The movie is about a man coming to terms with what he believes is his own kind of supernatural power, or a supernatural power that's been forced upon him, and trying to understand it or punish himself for it. Does that make sense? You don't need other characters. This is all about the actor Richard Boone, who is in a ton of stuff, not a lot of science fiction or horror. Tons of stuff, being a guy that becomes the manager of this LA, chairman of this LA cemetery.
Immortal
Hills.
But I really do think it's still the cemetery that's in LA.
Yeah, it is a real cemetery. That's what I said. It's an LA cemetery. It really is a real cemetery. That's the thing. You can we just went on a trip to out east from Michigan, and we stopped at the cemetery that they filmed Night of the Living Dead at, the original Night of the Living Dead, those scenes, and it's a real place. You can go there. You can find the stones that they stood in front of and said, "Oh, this is our mother's grave. This is the stone that Barbara leaned against." This cemetery is that kind of thing. It's not that same cemetery, but I'm saying you can go there. The only thing that I read that was different for the cemetery is the caretakers, the management hut that was built. It was built for this film and torn down afterwards.
Oh, that's a shame.
I don't know. It's clearly a set,
Yeah.
so I don't mind. But anyway, Richard Boone, fantastic actor. The only thing that's kind of sci-fi, fantasy, horror related that you might know him from is he's the voice of Smaug from the original Hobbit cartoon. Okay, you go with that. Now, the caretaker is played by Theodore Bickel. He's a young man, and they make him look incredibly old in this. Well, I can't say he's a young man. He's in his late 30s, well, mid 30s in
But
this
they
movie.
make him look 60, 70 years old.
Yeah, they do.
And he's supposed to be, 40 years running as the caretaker?
Yeah, something like that. You will know him from things because he was in a lot of television, including Babylon 5. Later on, he was in Star Trek The Next Generation for an episode, but a lot of television, a lot of movies in kind of bit parts, okay? You will recognize him if you see pictures of him, not in makeup here because he looks way too old and strange in this. Yeah, he's even in My Fair Lady, Darlene, like Zoltan Karpathy. You love My Fair Lady,
yes.
So anyway, these are the two lead actors. Do they, and even before we get into the plot, because this plot is, if you want to discover this movie, stop the review right now.
Yeah.
Because this is a movie that I shouldn't spoil for you at all. So if you're interested in watching this, before we go any further, we recommend this movie.
Yes, we do.
This is a very good movie.
This is a thought movie.
Yeah, this is a thinking movie. So stop now, go watch the movie and come back. We're not going to judge you for stopping the review, but please come back and listen to us talk about it, because you might start thinking, boy, I have a lot to say about this movie. As you said, Darlene, this is kind of a thinking movie. So let's get into the spoilers now. Let's get into the actual plot of the movie. We both loved it. There is a lot that works in this, and even before getting into the plot, I can't think of something that does not work in this movie. This is a very effective, tight psychological drama that has supernatural overtones. I can't think of a single thing that really doesn't work.
The use of the females really bothers me, though.
Oh, that they're just there to be like, oh, honey, you need to calm down. Let's go on vacation.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that they have the one woman in this film. See, I don't even know her name.
Well, there's two, because you have
Anne, right? You
have the new wife for 5 seconds, but she gives you a laugh.
Yeah, she is exactly what you need to have in that part. There's no shame in the small part that she played. Okay,
and she did it well.
Yeah, she did it well. It's the character's Anne Craig, played by Peggy Moorer, and she is damn near forgettable in this film. That's the problem.
She is.
This was one of her biggest roles. The problem is in defense of the movie, she didn't need to be any more than the part that she was playing. It's not like she was written to be a major role and then they sidelined her because she's an actress and they want to give more meaty roles to the guys. It's not like that. They literally have very little for anyone outside of the two main characters.
I will
to do.
put it this way: if you wrote this book, this thing today, the chairman, Robert Kraft,
Kraft.
could be played by a Roberta
Oh, yeah. No, and
and
that's exactly...
still work.
That is exactly how I would rewrite this today. I would rewrite it as a woman becoming the manager of this cemetery, okay? And I would put the social commentary down about sexism, about women in places of authority. I would actually put that subtext in there, okay? Would it change the meaning of the film too much? I don't think so. You'd have to be good about it.
You'd have to actually, instead of having a lieutenant that's of the local thing, you'd have to have it be an FBI agent, though.
Yeah.
Or CIA
But
that's doing this.
do you think the subtext of bias against women in authority would be too... I mean, without writing it and actually showing it, I can't say is it too heavy-handed, but do you think it would change the meaning of this story too much? We haven't even talked about the plot, but we're just kind of riffing here because this is a really good movie.
I don't think that needs to be in that.
No. I think you could literally just swap out the actor.
It would be just a few conversations on the phone where she's getting irritated with...
Because the male actor in this got irritated at times.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. The subtext would just be there because of the change, I would think. Because you could keep the dialogue damn near exact. You could. Just swap the genders.
Well, you could have her have a fiance.
Yeah, a male, a guy that's coming in and telling her the exact same things that Anne Craig told.
Or on the phone.
And it would actually not be sexist either. Like because what she does in the film for the plot is to try to slow down the descent of the main character. She's trying to be this grounding element, and therefore she's not being like the shrewish...
You could even have it actually as the husband, or she could have been the wife in this case. In this movie, she could have actually even been a wife.
She could have been. It didn't need to be...
not a fiance.
That's how unimportant the outside characters are. Like, there's only one side character that truly does have a little bit of a part. Uncle George. But let's just talk about the plot, because we're just riffing here. People don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Starts with a thing on the screen.
Oh, yeah. It goes... we begin the movie in a graveyard and a text crawl, and there's a quote that includes, "Science has learned that man possesses powers beyond the boundaries of the natural." And I wrote, no, it hasn't. Like, that's, if science has discovered it,
I knew he was writing.
It's not beyond the realm of the natural because science has discovered it. Like,
I laughed about, because I sat there and watched him just sit there and write.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, God damn it.
He stopped the film to write the whole words and then kept writing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is taking a lot more longer.
Well, longer than that. Yeah, it's because I thought, if Criswell said this, that would be perfect. It's the nonsense that Criswell spews in the Ed Wood movies.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Criswell has charisma, and you'd be laughing about it, where this is just like supposed to be kind of a semi-serious quote. Well, it's supposed to be a serious quote, not semi. It's a serious quote. And that ticked me off. Anyway, so it started with me being kind of ticked off. It quickly changed. And so we see two men walking into the groundskeeper's hut in a graveyard. Okay. And that is Richard Boone playing Robert Kraft and Theodore Bickel playing Andy McKee. Okay, Andy McKee is this kind of a Scottish guy. He's old. He's going to be retiring soon. Robert Kraft is, let's say, a young middle-aged man who is up and coming in the Kraft family, who is known in the local community for being... What does Uncle George say? That they are civic-minded, that with great power comes great responsibility. He doesn't say, Uncle George doesn't say that, but it's basically like, we have made money from this community, and
as a department
store. A department store. We've taken care of this community's needs, but that also means that we need to give back to the community.
And he
it's
also
for two
says
reasons.
that they've always had a person on the
board, like as management for this cemetery, because we take care of them from birth to death. Now, the reasons he gives of why the family does this is perfectly honest and fair. He goes, number one, it's good for business because it shows that we care. Two, we care. And it's because without this community, we would be nothing.
Yeah, and you get the fact in this conversation, this is after this caretaker and that, but you get a conversation that Robert, Bob, as Uncle George says.
The main character.
Yeah, Bob, Robert Kraft, is reluctant to be in this position.
And it's not because he's a dick. It's because I think he's honestly uncomfortable at being at a cemetery. I think that's it. Like he seems to be actually a very good business person. He seems to be well connected in the community. People seem to respect him, not because of his family, but because of him. So him coming off and saying, I really don't want to be in this position, after about the first half hour, you kind of get the point that no, it's not because he's a dick.
It could also be the fact that he's having to get Andy to retire.
Yeah, and he didn't want to do that because Andy has been such an important part of the cemetery's
and this
legacy.
Is the conversation you have immediately
when
they walk into the hut.
Yeah, that
Andy or the office.
Andy is being told that it's time for him to retire, so because he's getting old and slow.
He's getting full pension.
Yeah. Robert says, look, Andy, you are taken care of. We are going to pay you your full paycheck for the rest of your life. You will not have to move. Your house is paid for.
His house is just down the road.
It's actually right outside the cemetery, he says. Because Andy's
and he's got a plot in the
cemetery that was provided for him. Like, this family clearly cares about their employees. And Andy is not really enthused about this. He's like, but what am I going to do with my life? And Robert's like, whatever you want. And it's not like we're throwing you out of the cemetery. Whoever we hire to take your place. Now, what does Andy do? He digs graves. He actually carves headstones.
And he probably takes care of the grounds.
And he's a groundskeeper. There's a lot to be done to train whoever they bring in, whatever young man they bring in, young man or young woman. He actually does say, I'm sure there's 2 or 3 young men in the community that would be really willing to learn from you. So Andy, the conversation comes across that Andy's still going to be actually actively working at the cemetery for the next couple years, just not as the full-time groundskeeper. He's training somebody.
And Robert is giving him the ability to hire someone himself.
Yeah, you make the choice, man. You make it. There is obviously a lot of respect given to Andy. And honestly, all the conversations that Andy has with people, you realize why there's respect for Andy. He's kind. He's considerate of other people. He's a good conversationalist. He has a good amount of humor. That he's always making people smile around him. And he says you can't be any other way in this business because you only see people on their worst days. So you have to have this. You have to be charming. And that's where he says, like, you have to find the right person for this job because they can't be just anybody with a strong back. And again, like, this is all in like a quick little scene. This is a lot of dialogue, but it builds these 2 characters.
And it doesn't even take 3 minutes.
No, this is solid writing.
And then Andy, the caretaker, shows Robert how to deal with the map.
Okay, and he shows him where the gun is kept, because sometimes unruly teenagers get into the cemetery after dark, and you need to scare them away, and things have been getting worse lately. Let's say that's what he says. So you never know if you ever need it. And Robert doesn't blink. He checks the gun, puts it away.
And they also have a conversation about the heat.
Yeah, that the hut's always cold, and there's like a gasoline or kerosene heater or something
I'd
like
say
that.
it was a kerosene heater.
So the whole point...
And it doesn't work most of the time.
The whole point of this hut is that one of the walls has a map on it of the cemetery. And it shows the roads and big dark lines, right?
And every plot.
And every plot that is currently bought has a name on it.
And a pin.
And a pin. If the person is still alive, there's a white pin in it, in the plot. If the person is dead and buried, there is a black pin in it. Or at least, let's say dead. There is a black pin in it. Otherwise, it has no pin in it. Like it's an open plot.
So, it might actually have a name, because that's what happens in the first scene. The second scene.
Well, right here, what happens is that, no, there's already names on it. That's the thing. There is a name on it here. Because we see a couple newlyweds come in a really nice car. And it turns out that it's the new Mr. and Mrs. Drexel. Okay, and I forget it's Elizabeth Drexel, and what's the Stuart Drexel is the guy's name. And they are young. They are
just married.
They are now incredibly wealthy, because the Crafts,
father or his grandfather?
His father. The Crafts and the Drexels as families have known each other for a while, but the Drexels have fallen on hard times, not because of a lack of money. It's because the father, who was the real businessman of the family, had died young and left all of this money in trust for his son. Okay. And it's explained, and I know this really doesn't have much to do with the plot, but it's an interesting play-by-play, that Stuart couldn't get a hold of any of the money until he was married.
And he bought a plot.
And it was officially assigned a plot for his wife in the family's gravesite. Okay. So Stuart and his wife came out there to talk to Kraft, to go, hey, I need you to put our pins in these two graves, because the lawyer then will know that I've come out here to say she is my wife. She will be buried in the family plot, and therefore the money is legally now mine. I'm going to go on a honeymoon, but when I get back, I'm going to see to the business needs of the Drexels. Okay, great. And all through this, Elizabeth Drexel's just like, I cannot believe that this is what needs to happen for my husband to get a hold of the money that is rightfully his. She comes off as a little shrewish, but you kind of also understand it. She's like, this is just, it's not that she's pissed that there is a hoop that has to go through. It's that the hoop is kind of creepy.
Yeah, and she's getting this is her wedding present.
Her wedding present is a grave. Yeah, it's a little...
So this got a little bit of comedy to it in this conversation.
Yeah, this is about the only comedy in the movie, though.
Mm-hmm.
It is lighthearted. It made us smile. He drives off. Happiness. Okay, so this is where we start learning that Robert Kraft doesn't want to be in this position. And the rest of the family says that he needs to do it because the Kraft family has always taken part in community projects. This is what we were already talking about. But
yes,
this is where
but right before that scene, you have Robert putting two black pins instead of white ones
into the Drexels
plots.
Yes. Okay, so Robert gets a phone call at his office, and he then learns that Stu and his new wife have died. So he goes out to the cemetery, and Andy is there to meet him. And he goes up to the map, like Andy says, hey,
look. In a car accident,
yeah.
From what I understand.
It was in a car accident, like very soon after they left the cemetery.
Cemetery, yes.
So Andy says, well, you best change their pins. Robert goes up to the map and sees that he already had put black pins in their spots. And he thinks it's an eerie coincidence. He doesn't like it. It's these two young people had died.
And
This is where his Robert's fiance shows up, and Craig. Yeah. And he ends up screwing around at the map a little bit, distracted by his fiance, and he ends up sticking a black pin into because he had a whole bunch of black pins in his hand, basically to go and change the pins. And then he just thumps the map, and one of these black pins ends up sticking into another grave marker that's labeled W. Isham. And we go to his office, and he's a doll maker. He's an old man who's a doll maker. Toy maker or doll maker? He's sewing a teddy bear.
He's sewing a teddy bear. So doll maker wouldn't really work either.
Okay, that's fair, fine. But he's making a teddy bear, and then he seemingly has a stroke in front of us
as he puts the eye in.
As he puts an eye into this teddy bear, and he dies. The next day, we're back at the cemetery, and Andy is there, polishing and polishing the Drexler gravestone. He's also gotten the heater working in the office, and he's really cheerful about that. He's like, "Oh, Bobby, look at what I did. This office is going to be warm again."
He doesn't call. He calls him all the time, Mr. Kraft.
He says Bobby a couple times.
Does he?
Yeah. He now thinks there's something. Well, at this point, Mr. Kraft thinks that there's something wrong with the map, because he's learned about Isham's death at this point, and also sees that he had popped a black pin there somehow. And he's like, okay, this is creepy. I want nothing to do with it. I'm going to go talk to Uncle George. So he goes to talk to Uncle George, and he says, look, I'm quitting. I'm done. And he talks about how he's changed these pins and people are dying. And they both go out to the cemetery, and they test it by changing a pin from white to black. Because Uncle George is completely, this is nonsense. You need to get over this crap, and we're gonna show it.
Henry Throwbridge.
Yeah. So Robert calls his wife, calls this guy's wife, his Henry Trowbridge, and his wife answers the phone
at 11:30.
Yeah, at 11:30, and she comes back down to the phone because she's like, "No, he's up in bed reading. I'll go get him." And she comes back crying, and it turns out he's just died. His body's still warm, but he has just died. So police show up at the graveyard the next morning. Obviously,
because Robert
called them.
Yeah,
Robert's like, look, I can't explain this. I think I'm doing something.
And you see that Robert, the actor, does this pretty good. He is actually showing signs of depression, of
anxiety. He's cracking up. He's slowly cracking up.
He really believes he's cursed.
I wouldn't say cursed, because he doesn't even say cursed. He says that there's something about me and this map that every time I do something with it.
Well, that's how I simplified it on my paper.
Because he's saying, like, it can't be this map by itself, because other people have used this map for years, and I'm sure that there's been mistakes.
There's a reporter that's involved in this too.
Yeah, that is for the local paper.
And he's very nice to Robert, and he talks to him going, this can't be something that
it's not super. Yeah, it's not supernatural.
Like,
this is just,
they're walking in the graveyard, and he's like, that's only a piece of paper. The reporter says,
look, it's a coincidence, and plus, like, the two people that the two newlyweds, that's a coincidence, sure, but the other two people were very old, and actuarially, it's not impossible to think that they just both randomly died. But then you're like, well, he randomly hit these pins into people's graves and just changed them to black, and they died within hours. Like, there's
within that day.
But yeah, he can't really even explain it. he just is like, this has something to do with me. Anyway, his Uncle George tells him that, look, just go on vacation. Just go on vacation. When you get back, if you still want to quit, then we'll talk about it. But the point is that the board of directors for the Kraft family businesses is very serious about this civic-minded duties, and they really would not want you to quit. And at this point, Robert's like, you know what? I'm not gonna go on vacation, even though his fiance is there, and she's like, yeah, let's go. We can do the things that we want. There's things in Europe that we can do. And he's like, no, I have to figure this out. There's life and death happening here. And
so he takes his responsibilities very heavily.
He does, even though he doesn't want to do that at this point. Now the fact is that people have died, and he feels responsible somehow for their deaths, and he's not going to give up until he figures it out. Again, Robert Kraft, a good guy. A good guy. In fact, I would go so far as to say there's only one black hat in this. This is weird compared to most of the movies that we've seen lately, where there's no good people in it. Everyone in this movie is actually kind of a good person except one.
Well, and you don't know that one person.
Yeah.
But I do say that the lieutenant is bad too.
No. Even the reporter says this guy's good, because if it was anybody else, remember when they're out there talking, when the reporter and him are out there talking, the reporter says, be glad it was Lieutenant Claiborne that came out here and talked to you, because if it was anybody else, they'd have locked you away in a loony bin, or they would have talked to the newspapers themselves and said that you were crazy. Claiborne's a good guy, so he's understanding you're under pressure, and he's not going to hold it against you. Again, the lieutenant is a good guy. Yes, later on he does one thing that is slightly shady, but it's for a good purpose, to prove something to everyone and to figure out exactly what is happening. So he's actually being a good police officer at that point. Let's say he's not being a good friend, but he's being a good police officer, and he apologizes for it. Because again, he's a good guy too, and everyone likes Robert Kraft. So anyway, like this movie is fantastic for this stuff. Let me go back into my notes. Now, out at the cemetery, we have Robert putting pins in, and it's basically because...
Oh, that's because the three chairmen...
The chairman of the board are like, no, prove this.
Request Roberts
to change all of their pins to black. Because all three of us are not together. We'll leave here, go separate ways, and there is no way that there's no way that all three of us can die. I'm healthy, he's healthy. And we all live in different parts.
One of them is his uncle too.
Yeah, we all live in different parts of town. There's no way that this is real, and this will prove it. It's all been a coincidence. So Robert goes out to the cemetery and puts the black pins in, and the reporter calls out to the office. He thinks it's a good... they talk for a little bit about what this idea was, and the reporter's like, yeah, this is a good idea because this will put this crap to rest, and you can get on with your life.
I thought that was Uncle
Nope,
George
that's
that
the
came to
reporter.
the office.
No, you're jumping ahead of scene.
Oh, okay.
That's the reporter saying this is a good idea. So at this point, Robert really is cracking up, and he's seeing the map basically getting larger and larger on the wall.
And I will say there's a scene here that I really think that it happens. It's cliched thing to happen, but what it tells you is that a person is going within themselves. Yeah,
there's a couple shots where like it freeze frames and like drags off into the distance into like this black. Yes, and it's very good because it's symbolic for Robert feeling isolated, feeling out of control, feeling surrounded by this darkness of death, and that he has no ability to get out of it.
So even though I haven't seen it in new films.
It was very effective here.
It was very effective in here, and if you wanted to use something as a film person, You'd have to watch this movie and see how it is used. But it's very specifically used because it's the person becoming insane.
Yes. So I'm looking up who the director is, and it's a man named Albert Band.
Wouldn't it be cinematography, though?
Yeah, the director. It's fine. Did a lot, including some kind of crazy
Pit and the Pendulum?
Yeah, doing some kind of crazy sword and sorcery stuff from the 90s. Curse of the Puppet Master. Wow. So, I mean, he's done some stuff. Let's see here. Director of photography is Frederick Gately. Sorry, I'm clicking away at... did a lot of work, but nothing that stands out to me that I've seen, really. So anyway, going back to the movie. We end up there's lots of phone calls, and each of the pins that he has changed to black of this committee have died. Except for Uncle George, who shows up, and George is scared. Because he's learned about all these deaths, and that's why he jumped in his car and drove right to the cemetery.
Uncle George is in a coat.
House coat.
House coat. No, he's in a coat, but underneath it you see a house coat.
Okay, yeah, he's in robes.
And pajamas.
He's scared. He's really scared, and he wants to leave with Robert, who says everyone dies on the map's time, not theirs.
And
because
George takes
is trying
his pin out of the...
Yeah, he just takes the pin out. He doesn't put a white pin in there, but he just...
brings the next thing into question.
What?
The next thing is nobody can find Uncle George.
Yeah, but during this time, Robert is freaking out inside the office hut.
And the thing goes to small.
Yeah, and this is the problem that he feels isolated. He feels out of control, and the cops keep calling him, and he keeps calling the cops, keeping them informed about what's going on. Yeah, he is calling from the cemetery. Everyone knows where he is. Everyone understands that he's not killing people. And he finally gets the courage to leave the room with the map and goes out, and he sees Uncle George's car still running just against a tree with Uncle George dead inside of it as he was leaving the cemetery. So he moves the body out of the driver's seat and drives the car back to the office, and then gets on the phone and calls the cops. I just found Uncle George. He was dead in the cemetery. Why didn't you come out here?
And this has got to be for a while, so it's probably
a few hours.
It's got to be a few hours that takes place, because they were calling him trying to find Uncle George.
Yeah, so at this point, Robert really is losing his mind. And there's some amazing cinematography here, where you have the camera close in with these pins on the map, they're huge soccer ball sized things. The map is covering the entire wall of this hut, glowing
and
white.
It starts looking like two eyes.
Yeah, because of the way the roads spiral.
The roads are, one of them is a spiral up to a monument. They talk about that in the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see, this is really up to date,
mm-hmm.
because there's the monument.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, and you could probably tell
is a loop.
It's a loop. And with something going in a road going in the center.
But he's talking to the map. He's why are you doing this? Why do I have this gift, or how do I have this power? Because it's not really I don't think he says ever that it's a curse. He talks about it as a power.
I shortened it to a curse up there in the thing. I don't know if he said it or not. So
finally he's sweating, and he's holding all these pins in his hands, and he's fine, if I have the power of death with black pins, I have the power of life with white pins. So he takes all the black pins out of the grave sites that have just died during these incidents, and he puts in white pins. Okay. And this is where he's imagining the map glowing, and It's like his shadow is being cast behind him, like starkly from the light coming off of this map.
Great cinematography.
Very, very good, very good, and good acting, like very good acting. Gravestones start falling outside, and he hears them. So Robert
grabs the pistol.
Yeah, and he leaves. He ends up going out into the cemetery after a while. Like he blocks himself into the office for a little while, and then gets up the courage to leave to see what's happening outside, because he's heard all this commotion outside, and it's at least a few hours, because he's built like a fire. There's like smoke that finally kind of clogs the inside. Remember, this office is cold all the time, and in one of his fits he broke the heater, so he like broke up some wood that was inside.
It wouldn't light for him, so he kicks it.
Oh, okay.
It's not that he broke it, it's that it wasn't working.
He ends up going outside, and all of the graves that he had changed are now empty. They're like empty open holes in the ground.
And that's distressing.
And he goes back into the office like shaking. He gets the gun out of the desk again that's been tipped over, and he puts the gun to his head.
But the phone rings.
But the phone rings right when he's about to pull the trigger. And I'm like, okay, here's the thing again.
Oh, did we forget a spot where it was late Lieutenant Claiborne asked him to change a healthy man in France's?
We could have. But yeah, there's another test where he has to change somebody that's off in Europe, that's a healthy person that is nowhere near this town.
And this is the bad thing of...
We'll get to it. Phone rings. It turns out that he hears that this guy... Well, this is what causes him to almost kill himself, is that this guy... he gets word that this guy died in Europe.
In France.
And...
A healthy man in France.
It turns out at this point that we learn that Andy, the groundskeeper, has been killing everybody at this point, that Robert has been putting black pins in.
Because immediately Andy says, I did not kill... the death in France is impossible.
Yeah, the death in France is impossible because I didn't do it. And Robert's like, why have you been doing this? And Andy doesn't have a super good explanation besides like, I don't want to be put to pasture. And my life is too important here. And he seems even confused talking about it. And Robert gets really calm and he's like, Andy, you didn't do this. The map forced you to do it because I changed the pins. And Andy's confused at this point because, again, what's the truth here, Darlene?
Well, we find out what the truth is.
We sort of do, right? We sort of do. But it is, Robert says, look, it's not your fault. And Andy's going to like...
He dug up the graves.
He dug up the graves to get all these people out. And Robert thinks that it was still him that made all of this happen. And Andy was angry and ends up dying here. He ends up like having a heart attack from the stress of it all and just kind of falls over. And there's this like great hanging light sequence like that's right above Andy's face, putting him in stark shadow, and it's swinging like in Psycho, but this is way before Psycho. Like, this is a fantastic thing.
Oh, and I will say that we actually, because of the graves, we actually know what date it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's May 24th, 1957.
Okay. So this is where, like, Robert kind of slumps to the floor. And the lieutenant comes in, and it turns out that the lieutenant set it up so Robert would get the phone call about this death when it wasn't true. This guy is completely fine in Europe. The point is that they wanted to force whoever was doing the killing's hand out to make a mistake.
And Claiborne thought it was
Andy doing these things.
Doing it.
But he's like, oh, look, this is all solved. And Robert and his wife, his fiancée, decide to leave. They leave. Like,
but
hey,
my God, I'm like so sorry for Robert being put into this position.
oh, dude, Robert, years of therapy. Because here's the thing, like the map
You
on
didn't
the
in this time. You didn't go through therapy unless
I know, but the point is that like as they leave, like the map falls off the wall in like a weird way that just seems sinister. So was it the map causing Andy to kill? Does it have a range? Do we know? Question mark. But it is the end.
Mhm.
Point is that this is a hands down fantastic movie. Hands down fantastic movie. And as we said, like before we started really talking, I can't think of anything that really truly doesn't work. You said, well, there's no real female parts in this. The fiance, she's just so minimal. But like I said, you could do this as a 2-person play. You don't need just the fact that there isn't a female part in this makes sense because you want to, at least for this time, for 1958, somebody that's in charge of the cemetery is going to be a guy, and whoever's digging graves is going to be a guy. Okay, now today, totally different story, right? Whoever's likely digging graves or is the groundskeeper still likely would be a guy.
And that's big of a cemetery would have more than one caretaker too.
Yes, today. But this would be a different movie today. You could make it very similar, but you know what? I don't want to see this remade. Like as a stage production, sure.
That's
great.
what I was thinking.
But as a movie, no, this is perfect the way it is.
I do understand what her part was to keep him from actually going totally insane.
Yes, she was grounding him a little bit. But Andy
and the reporter was doing the same thing.
Everyone really was doing that. Even Uncle George and the committee, because they were trying to be like, let's be rational about this. You're being irrational thinking a map and you have special powers. The point is that yes, you could take this entire movie as Robert being irrational and Andy screwing with him out of some sort of like misplaced rage about being put to pasture, even though he was being taken care of. Like, no, we're not cutting your pay. You have full pay for the rest of your life.
But on top of that, he didn't want to stop doing what he's doing.
Yeah. But would that really lead him to that? That's the other side of this. Does his confusion about his own rationale for doing this lead to the idea that maybe this map and Robert together have some sort of power? That's the other take on this movie, which is possible, but me being the person I am, I tend to go along the lines of it wasn't supernatural at all. That this really was just kind of a confused old man who had misplaced rage, and this is a fantastic psychological thriller.
That's what I took it as.
A fantastic psychological thriller. Because this doesn't need to be supernatural. This is all inside Robert's head and Andy's misplaced
How
rage.
would you do? But then you put like I said, this is a thought process. What would happen to you if you were in Robert's place?
I'd destroy the map. Like the first time something crazy that I could not explain.
But that's the thing that keeps you...
Yeah, I would just I would destroy the map. There would be no questioning. It's like, okay, well, this thing is like a totem of evil or something like that.
But you had to keep the information that was on that map.
If I really don't want that position like Robert did, I'll destroy the map. Yeah, it might give me some shit, but in the end, this thing is terrifying me. I'm clearly not able to handle this position of being surrounded by death, and no one's believing me, so I'm just going to... I'm going to write exactly what I've done down. I'll try to keep all the information about the map, absolutely, but that map is gone. And if somebody
you would have taken the vacation,
or I'd have taken the vacation, and then the movie would have continued happening anyway as soon as you got back from vacation. At least with this movie, the point is that I would have destroyed the map. Andy would not have had any kind of access to it because my first idea would be somebody is using the map to screw with me. Not that it's supernatural, but that map is gone. No one's going to have access to it. And there's sure as hell not going to be a gun just sitting in a drawer. Because somebody's screwing with me. Like, that's how I would handle that situation. Now, how Andy would handle that at that point, I don't know. He would probably have to figure out a different, weirder way of dealing with it. But then again, I'm not going to be willy-nilly about putting pins into a board. If I think that somehow every time I put a pin in, somebody dies, I don't put pins in. Because even though I am a rational human being, Darlene...
And at that point in time that Robert was not wanting to put the pins in for those 3.
See, I'm not...
I wouldn't have done that.
I'm not
I would
a
have
person...
taken the doggone board down.
I'm not a person that believes in supernatural stuff in general, right? So, but even then, it's like somebody's either screwing with me, or I do have the power of life and death, and I'm not going to use it to kill people. So I'm just not going to put pins in. That's my solution. One or the other, it's going to stop this. One or the other, it will end.
But it was really good writing.
Incredibly good writing. Incredibly good writing. Good directing. Good cinematography. Good acting. It really was good acting. Very good acting. I don't know what I would even give this out of 10. It's really good. I can't give it... I don't think I'd ever give a movie a 10 out of 10. But this is like a 9. It really is. It's
to me, I was going to say an 8.
An 8?
Yeah.
To me, it's a 9 because there isn't anything in it that, besides that like first line, that kind of ticked me off about like, oh, science has determined supernatural powers. Like, no, it hasn't. Let's move on. That's silly. You didn't need that in there. If Criswell said it in an Ed Wood movie, perfect. This is not an Ed Wood movie, and it wasn't Criswell. That doesn't make sense.
And it wasn't supposed to be comedy.
It wasn't supposed to be comedy. So no, that didn't work. So I can't do that. Yeah, it was even the perfect length. It was like 70 something minutes long. It was very short, but it worked.
It's 76 minutes. Yes,
it worked. And I'm gonna keep geeking out about this. And
its pacing was
fun. It was perfect. Yeah, we were never bored watching it. We never said, when is this scene going to end? Never did. And it's because there's always dialogue happening that's moving the plot forward.
Even though there's a lot of phone calling at the time that...
Lots of phone calls, yeah.
Robert was, after the 3, when he changes the pins for the 3 chairmen, he stays there, like, waiting for...
Long shots.
There's a lot of... long shots.
But he's surrounded by the darkness of this hut. Like, it really does well to show his isolation again. Like him...
And even that was perfectly done for that small...
Mm-hmm.
Everything going narrow.
Shrinking down into this, like, point of light as you zoom away. Yeah. This is going on my list of ones to watch again. I mean, like, again, as in soon again, to appreciate it again. And I think this is a really good Halloween movie.
Yeah.
Because this is creepy. It touches on supernatural crap in cemeteries. Is it supernatural? Who knows? No. We're not recording this around Halloween. Don't get me wrong, folks. We're not. I'm just saying, like, as a good, honestly scary movie, this is a good scary movie without any
horror, any grotesque.
Well, horror in a classic sense, it does.
Well,
right,
in the
modern sense,
the gross
body
guts.
Horror, nothing
There
like that.
A kid could watch this; it wouldn't know what is going on.
No, I think a kid could watch this and get about the same kind of level of horror out of it that an adult would. Like, because
I wouldn't recommend a kid,
like a little kid. No. But I'm talking like
a teenager would.
A teenager would get what's going on in this. Yeah. Like, this is a very good movie. We're recommending it. Please watch this movie. We watched it for free on Amazon Prime, and it's free. And it's arguably one of the better movies we've watched.
We went to go watch The Curse of the Black Widow because I picked it up on Prime of that, and then you found out it was a TV movie, and that got crossed out of my numbers
because we don't do TV movies just because of the way that how it's edited for commercial breaks up pacing, and it makes it a little more choppy. And for Earth versus Soup, I've always thought that it would have to be a very special TV movie for us to review. Like, remember that one movie that we watched that it was like the time belt that had, Captain Pike from the original Star Trek, that they're jumping back and forth in time, and he's working for that crazy spy agency, and it looks just like an original series Star Trek episode.
Okay.
That was originally supposed to be a TV movie, but they re-edited it for theatrical release, and it made sense. Like, the pacing was fine. There weren't these like cliffhanger commercial crap that really, to me, ruins it. That's why we haven't reviewed the Flash Gordon serials, because it's the cliffhanger crap that just gets too easily resolved after the cliffhanger.
Well, a lot of it doesn't get resolved, and you're in the next.
Yeah, and it's just, we ignore it, and
you ignore it.
Screw it. No,
in Flash Gordon.
No, and we love Flash Gordon, but reviewing Flash Gordon for Earth versus Soup would be a nightmare. For like, what is this movie trying to say? It's not really trying to say anything. It's just trying
to be fun.
It's just trying to be fun.
But think where it was coming from too. Those were in the front of some other movie.
Yeah, sometimes. But we're getting away from this movie. Please watch I Bury the Living. 1958, worth every moment you spend on it. Please, please, please watch. Any other thoughts, Darlene?
No, there's nothing too much to say on something this well put together.
Yeah, credit where credit's due, folks. This really is worth the time.
I can't understand why whatever it is, has a, what is it, 5.7?
Oh yeah, Internet Movie Database has, it's 6.3 out of 10. Honestly, 6.3 out of 10 is way too low for this movie. And I'm going to put in my damn rating. This is a 9 out of 10. I just put it in. There, boom.
Yeah.
That is way too low. So, I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. You have a good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.